Now sadly, as a lot of you will know, the Pokemon TCG has been subject to some market manipulation recently, and unfortunately it would seem quite a few people have been burnt quite badly by this market manipulation. And if we jump straight into the most famous example of this market manipulation, we have the Drowzee from Scarlet and Violet Base. Now, a lot of you will be aware, as it has been the talk of the town over the last few weeks, this Drowzee saw an astronomical rise only a few weeks ago. As we can see here, around February 15th, only around $36, and in February 18th, only 3 days later, it was $85. So it rose $50 in the space of 3 days, which of course is not a natural rise, right? But as we can see, since it hit that high point of $85, it's tailed off quite rapidly. And as we can see, as of today, as of March 10th, it sits at almost half that price at around $45 US. Now, to begin with, I do want to preface by saying this card is a desirable card, right? I'm not saying it should be a $2 card, because it shouldn't, right? There's a few things to take into consideration. For example, one, Drowzee is Generation 1. As we know, Generation 1 Pokemon has a very high level of nostalgia and play there, therefore there's a decent level of desirability for that Pokemon. Secondly, Tomokazu Komoye is the illustrator for the card. Now, for those of you that are not aware, Tomokazu Komoye is a famous illustrator in the Pokemon card world, and he does like that kind of abstract style art. As you can see from that Drowzee card, it's very, very different, right? It's very kind of dreamy, and there's very abstract style art, and that's his art style. And there are going to be people that do enjoy that art. There's a market for that, and therefore that adds another level of desirability to that card. But despite that, when you are looking at purchasing cards and you're not sure whether or not it's artificial market manipulation, you're just not sure on whether to buy or not based on the price it's currently at, that's when you need to make comparisons. For example, when that Drowzee, at that time at February 18th, when it was around 85, or even a few days prior when it was around 66 or 46, or even afterwards when it was 77, 73, 68, compare it to other cards. For example, the Venusaur EX from 151. Now, this is an SIR. As we know, the SIRs are harder cards to pull. They're just better cards in general. These are normally your chase cards within sets. Now, around that same sort of time, if you look for that February sort of time there, February 15th, February 17th, it's around the same price, right? $84 as we go back to around that February 17th time, 66, and the day late at 85. It's a very similar price to what that Venusaur was at the same time. And then when you compare the two cards, you look at Venusaur EX, SIR from 151, to a Drowzee IR from Scarlet and Violet Base, you think, should they really be the same price? I mean, of course, at the end of the day, it's opinion based as to what your favorite card is. But in the grand scheme of things, you're comparing an IR from Scarlet and Violet Base to an SIR from 151. I really don't think there's much comparison in play here. I do think Venusaur is a much better card and should demand a lot higher price than that Drowzee IR from Scarlet and Violet Base. Just a quick message to express my gratitude and appreciation to all of you for continuing to show support on my channel. Whether that's a like, a comment, a view, or even a subscription, I really do greatly appreciate it. And for those of you that are new here, welcome to the channel and thank you for being here. For those of you that are not yet subscribed and perhaps you're thinking of doing so, I love to talk about the Pokemon TCG and I make a new video every other day. So if you like the sound of this, please feel free to subscribe and I'd love to have you here. Now, of course, when you compare Pokemon cards, it comes down to opinion. If you think that the Drowzee card is more beautiful than that Venusaur card, that's absolutely fine. But let's look at the facts. Now, to begin with, S&V Base versus 151. I do think 151 is the superior set. I think it's a lot more desirable than Scarlet Violet Base. That's not to say Scarlet Violet Base is a bad set. I do think it's starting to get its flowers recently and it deserves the flowers it gets. But I do think with the amount of nostalgia in play with 151, I do think it is a better set than S&V Base. Secondly, that Venusaur card is an SIR. As we know, SIR cards are harder to pull than IRs. They also have texture on them. They just look a little bit more beautiful in person than those illustration rare cards. Also, lastly, Venusaur, in my opinion, is just a more desirable Pokemon than that Drowzee. Venusaur, of course, being the final evolution from one of the original 3 starter Pokemon in Kanto. Therefore, there's a huge level of nostalgia and desirability in play here with that card and that Pokemon, compared to Drowzee, which, yes, it is a Kanto Pokemon, but it's just a regular Pokemon. We're talking about a starter here, a final evolution of a starter, compared to a regular Pokemon in Drowzee. So with that being said, if you're looking at purchasing a card potentially around the time it's booming, maybe there's FOMO in play, maybe you just didn't realize how good a card it was and now you want to pick it up for your collection, that's when you need to start asking questions and comparing it to other cards. As we compared the Venusaur and the Drowzee, if you see this card going from around that mid-80 mark, or maybe a few days earlier around that $70 mark, and then you compare it to a card like this Venusaur EX SIR from 151, and you see it's around the same sort of price, that's when you need to start asking questions. Maybe that Drowzee's overpriced. Maybe it's not sensible to purchase it right now. But that's when you can also look at it from a different angle. Maybe you can think, well, you know what? Maybe that Venusaur's just underpriced, you know? If this Venusaur's around that sort of $70, $80 mark, and the Charizard card's around $300 from 151, maybe I'll pick up this Venusaur instead of that Drowzee. Maybe I can use that same amount of money more wisely and pick up a better card in one that's underpriced and has the potential to grow in the future. Just another example of market manipulation, we have the Houndour card from Obsidian Flames. Now this is a shame because I really do enjoy this card. I think it's very beautiful and I'm sure a lot of people also want this card. Now, if we pull up the 6-month chart to begin with, we can see for the longest time from September all the way through to December, it was only $2 to $3. Now to begin with, yes, this card is probably worth more than that. Not probably, I'd say it is, to be fair. $2 to $3 is very little in the grand scheme of things. Therefore, I think it was undervalued for quite a long time. Now, if we pull up the 3-month chart, I think to begin with, we can see quite a natural rise. If we look here around the mid to late January, it's only $4 to $5 US. And if we look a month later, around middle of February, $12. So pretty much doubled in value in a month's time. Pretty normal rise, right? It's not artificial at all. I'd say that's very natural. But then when we pull up the 1-month chart, we can see how quickly that has risen. We can see the shape of that chart here and flew all the way to $34 on the 21st of February. Now, unfortunately, since then, it's nosedived and has dropped all the way down to $13 US. And as you can see, it's started to plateau out now. As we can see, the shape of that chart, it stopped going down and started to kind of level out. So I don't think it will drop anymore. I think it will sort of settle around between that $10 to $15 US mark, which I think is a fair price for this card. And you know what, with time, just for those of you that potentially did buy in at a high price around $25, $30, rest assured guys, I'm sure with time, this card will start to rise. I do think it's worth a little bit more than that. And as we know, cards normally tend to age well, especially those better cards, illustration rare cards, and SIR cards from Scarlet Violet era. I think in the next sort of 2 to 3 to 5 years, will rise and appreciate nicely. So if you did buy in at a high price and you're thinking, I've lost some money here, hold on to it. Don't just sell it thinking I want to recoup some of my money. Hold on to it. Let it appreciate in value over the next few years, and I'm sure you'll get your money back. Now, we've looked at some examples of market manipulation, how the cards' graphs look, and also how their prices change in such a short span of time. But I want to show you an example of a card that maybe perhaps looks like market manipulation. When you look at the facts, when you analyze it closely, it isn't actually market manipulation. So we have the Cresselia from Shrouded Fable, and in my opinion, the most beautiful card in that set. We're all entitled to our opinions, and you may completely disagree with me, and that's absolutely fine. If you do, let me know in the comments below. But I think this is the most beautiful card from that set. Now, Cresselia, of course, to begin with, we're talking about a legendary Pokemon here, therefore instantly more desirable Pokemon, normally going to demand a slightly higher price. And as we can see here, around December, it was only $8 to $9, which is quite cheap for this card, and I do think it was undervalued and underpriced. Now, if you look at how quickly it rose around that middle to late January, you can see 11, 12, 13, 14, 17, and then 31, just like that. You might think, market manipulation, it's risen quickly. If you look at the shape of that graph, in the matter of a few days, it's risen quickly. Two things, right? As we can see here, if we look at the dates, this is the important thing. As we can see, 13, 14 around the 19th of January to around the 24th of January. And when you did that mark there around $31, we're talking February the 2nd. So from January 19th to February 2nd, we're talking 10 to 14 days, right? In comparison to this Drowzee, which went from 36 all the way up to 85 in 3 days. It's not as quick, although it looks it based on that graph, it's actually not risen as quickly as that Drowzee and that Houndour, for example. Secondly, when it has risen to 31, and you might be asking the question, but look, it's dropping off, that's market manipulation. I don't think so. I do think the fact that it has risen to 31, that means it's tripled in value from when it was $9 back in December. Some people are in the singles market to make money. Some people have probably bought quite a few Cresselias at around that $8 to $9 because it's undervalued. They've seen it triple in value to 31, and now they're selling. Or even people that are not in it for the money and just think, you know what, I can't turn down $30 for a card I bought for $8, therefore I'm going to sell. Therefore, there's a lot more cards on the market. And when there's more cards on the market, supply is a lot higher, and therefore demand drops off a bit because supply's been pushed up so much. And when people start to sell when more cards are available, that's when prices start to drop, because there's so many cards competing for a price, prices come down a bit, people are purchasing it at cheaper prices. Therefore, as you can see also with the Drowzee card, you see how quickly that's dropped off. Same with the Houndour, how quickly it's fallen off, it's nosediving. Cresselia isn't doing that. Cresselia is falling off fairly steadily, and also at 31 down to 23 is not the biggest fall off, it's only $8. And I do think, guys, for those of you that have bought this card at around sort of $25–30 and you're thinking, it's falling off, what do I do? Hold that card, guys. It's a beautiful card. Cresselia is not going to crash much more than this. I won't even call this a crash, just a little bit of a fall off. I don't think it's going to get much cheaper. I do think Cresselia is a beautiful card. I do think, guys, hold your card if you're worried. Give it time, and this card will be a $30 card plus in the future. Don't worry. So we've looked at a few different cards. We've looked at some cards affected by market manipulation. We've looked at the aftermath of market manipulation, and I've also given some advice to those of you that perhaps you're not sure what to do. Perhaps you've bought a card at a high price, it's dropping, you're not sure what to do. Perhaps you want to purchase a card because you really like it, you want to add it to your collection, you want to complete a master set, and you're not sure whether to buy or not because it's rising in price. Perhaps you think it could be market manipulation and you're not sure. Guys, I've given you the advice. Do your comparisons, compare sets, compare different rarities of cards, compare the different Pokemon in those cards. Do your comparisons, take your time, analyze the different cards and the prices they're at, and make your decision, arrive to a conclusion based on the comparisons you do. But anyway, guys, that has been everything for today. I've enjoyed looking at the cards, how they've been affected by market manipulation, how they're performing now, afterwards, and also provide you guys with some advice that I hope can be helpful. Now, guys, let me know in the comments down below what you think of the cards, what you think of the whole situation with market manipulation, why you think it's happening, and what you think of the general situation of the TCG. I'm always interested to know what you guys think and also talk it out with you guys in the comments. If you haven't yet checked out my last video, guys, where I talked about some of the safest cards to buy right now in the TCG, cards ranging from only $8 or $9 up to $300, ones that are pretty much crash proof, you can check out that video right there. Apart from that, guys, that's been everything from me. If you have enjoyed the video, please leave a like as it really does help me out. Thank you so much for being here. I've been PokeCharla, and I'll catch you in the next one.